of business to review and approve the December minutes. I reviewed them. They look great. What's the term that we use to do this?
So you could either make or seek a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
And then you need a second.
I'll second, Sean.
Great. All in favor? Everyone? Good.
Right.
It's unanimous. The minutes are approved. Great. And then did you want to do the presentation, or was the next thing to just get our meeting dates approved, Betsy?
Let's do the presentation and we can talk
Okay.
about everything else afterwards.
Done.
So,
Done.
Barbara, do you have the slides?
I do have them, but my share button is still dimmed.
So I just made you the presenter. You should have privileges in like a second here. Okay.
Great.
Great, I can see that.
Okay. Just move you. Gingy, you want to say hello?
Sure, with my garbled little microphone here. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for accommodating our schedule to come out to Woodbridge to present the 2022 SEDS annual update and discuss the upcoming 5-year plan for 2023. So I'm going to turn it right over to Barbara because I know you have a lot to cover tonight. And if you have questions, just speak right up and we'll take them as we go through the presentation. Thank you. Barb, take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to just go over this quickly. I think most of you have been through it. Rex Development is the economic development organization for the region from Milford to Meriden to Madison. We are a federally recognized economic development district, which makes us available for additional funding beyond what other communities are allowed to get and apply for. One of the important things that we do is a comprehensive economic development strategy. And the idea is to get input from all of the towns and other stakeholders so that we have a truly actionable comprehensive economic development strategy. And it's not just some plan that sits on the shelf. It's also a requirement to get that funding that I mentioned earlier. In 2022, I was on a webinar and I heard this and I thought it was so true, is that economic development planning has never been more difficult. We don't have data. The situation is changing constantly, but it also has never been more important. Part of it is because everything is in flux, and part of it is also we actually have funding to make real changes. A lot of times we've talked about things we'd really like to do. We have a commitment from the community, but we don't have the funding. With the CARES money, the ARPA money, the infrastructure bill, there's a real chance for us to do the things that we want to do for the region. Normally we go into a lot of data, but this time we're going to limit it to 3 key points. Essentially, according to the US Census, our population has been flat since 2010, but we've all heard different numbers. U-Haul reports a big inflow of people into Connecticut. United Van Line says there's a huge outflow. We're going with what the information we were given through DECD from the US Postal Service that says there were 20,000 address changes into the state of Connecticut. So that would be households, not necessarily people. Of course, with that information, we don't know how many actually ended up in our region, but we can certainly see by the median home sales price, there is huge demand for homes in our region. A change in median home sales price from $217,500 in the fourth quarter of 2019 versus $285,000 in the third quarter of 2021 is a significant difference. The other piece that we're watching closely is the unemployment. We are still significantly, the state is still significantly higher than the US. And we're also seeing reduced workforce participation. We've identified at least two key factors in that. One is we have an aging population, and with home values being so high, if they wanted to sell the home, retire, move to a different area, this is the ideal time to do it. Plus, a lot of people who are eligible to retire often have health issues and are at greater risk from COVID infection. So there are two factors there that might lead them to leave the workforce. The second one is the lack of childcare for families, and typically we see that women are affected more dramatically than men, and that is another segment that we think is really a factor in the number of workers available for the open positions. What we're going to do now is sort of go through our goals and objectives from the 2018-2023 5-year SEDS update. And we're going to talk about these things that are all very familiar to us. And we're going to also talk about all of our major industries. We're going to start with healthcare. And I think one of the things that has been really remarkable during this period is, of course, in the beginning, hospitals were completely overwhelmed. We had no idea what to expect. We didn't have any treatments. It was just incredibly difficult for the hospitals, the staff, the patients. It really was an unknown quantity. However, after the first wave, the hospitals transitioned and had much better, they had learned a lot about the virus, and they were able to maintain their elective procedures that they had to discontinue during the first wave. In terms of economic development, that's absolutely crucial because that is their primary flow of dollars. So by being able to pivot to that new level of care, it really changed the impact that it had on healthcare as an economic driver. We saw this time a little better preparation because we knew more. When the Omicron variant was identified, Yale New Haven Hospital got permission to build a temporary ER with 35 beds. Again, it's one of those things we live and we learn, and we're seeing that those lessons are being put into practice. One of the things that we traditionally hear as we go around to town and organization to organization is, you know, the rest of the nation doesn't think very highly of Connecticut. And as unlikely as this seems, the pandemic seems to have improved that. Our expertise in public health, we have national attention. We go to meetings with the city of New Haven, and we'll have a doctor from the Yale School of Medicine and the hospital on. And 2 days later, you see the same physician on CNN. So we're certainly rising to the top in terms of prestige in the medical area. We also got kudos for the way we rolled out our vaccines. You know, at first there was, you know, a little bit of an uproar because we weren't using the CDC guidelines, but by doing it by age, it was cleaner. We didn't have people gaming the system. It wasn't like you had to get a prescription from your physician. It really made the whole process smoother, and a lot of other states followed our example. Again, Yale New Haven Health is moving forward with the Neuroscience Institute. We don't have dates, but that is still on the table. And we're also seeing Hartford Health increasing its presence in the region. So there will be more competition, but there will also be additional employment opportunities. This is one of the fields where we are definitely seeing the impact of labor shortages. but it's also an area where we could see our traditionally underemployed residents have the opportunity to move up a career ladder by starting with a certificate program within the healthcare industry, become a phlebotomist, become a radiologist. All of those different options are there, and there's a lot of determination to help get people better qualified to be in these positions. Higher ed, certainly they were shocked by the whole virus situation. They had students home on spring break and couldn't let them come back, not even to get the stuff out of the dorms. After that first semester, all of the colleges in the regions implemented strict testing protocols as a great partner to the community so that we didn't have community spread from the students. You know, places like Quinnipiac, Yale, University of New Haven have a lot of out-of-state students. So that was really important in terms of protecting our community, because while we had great vaccination rates, it wasn't perfect. So we need to make sure that we weren't opening ourselves up to additional infections. In general, the higher education sector has continued to work very closely with business to create both certificate and degree programs in our high demand fields. We're seeing bioscience, we're seeing STEM, some public works things, utilities. So there's definitely a commitment from the colleges and universities to help in terms of workforce development. Another, this was a piece of legislation that passed in the last session, pilot payments, and those are payments in lieu of taxes. And our 3 cities or 3 towns that have universities, especially, or hospitals, they were losing significant tax revenue because those properties are not taxable. So in that session, they created a formula, and there are 3 tiers in terms of pilot payments. So based on your grand list, you may get a higher payment for your non-taxable property. The great thing about this whole piece is none of our communities lost anything. You know, everyone was held harmless. So we were able to help our cities that do have a lot of non-taxable land without impacting any of our other towns. Bioscience, again, you know, we got a lot of positive public attention. People were very interested in the work that we've been doing here. And we, again, served as subject matter experts within the community and through national media. In terms of things that we have been working on for the last, well, probably more than 5 years, is the development of bioscience graduation space. We have a lot of startups, but for a long time, we did not have space for them to grow into. And now we're seeing a lot of investment in bioscience facilities, and we're seeing repeat investment. You may be familiar with Carter Winstanley, who did 100 College Street. He's now doing 101 College Street, and those buildings are fully leased or pre-leased. And what that will do is open up space in Science Park that can be used as graduation space. We're also seeing improved retention of bioscience companies throughout the region. One of the companies that's moving into 101 College is Arvinis. You may have noticed recently that Biohaven purchased a building next to their current building to expand. And it's really a positive step for our region. And one of the great things in recognition of the work that's being done here is the National Institute of Health has increased funding to organizations and institutions within our region from $454 million in 2018 to $567 million in 2021. I think that's a great recognition of the work that's being done here. and the importance that we have in continuing to grow career opportunities for our residents. Manufacturing, this has been a long time core industry in our region. From the pandemic, we saw the companies that could transition to manufacturing PPE. We also realized that we needed to have stronger relationships to support the supply chain. Some of it wouldn't have mattered if it doesn't make it to the country, if it's sitting in a port or isn't being produced, it's not going to matter. But we do believe that by creating stronger relationships, we'll be more resilient in terms of any future pandemic or other emergency. The state is recognizing the importance of manufacturing within Connecticut. They appointed their first chief manufacturing officer. He is actually retiring, and they will be announcing a new one shortly. Arts, culture, and tourism. It's really hard on this one to identify some really positive things that came out of it, because they have been so negatively impacted through the whole pandemic. We've seen, you know, venues and organizations and events and restaurants change their way of doing business, but it hasn't been enough to fill the gap caused by the lack of indoor activities. We continue to work on that. We are also having difficulty filling jobs in that sector. I think a lot of people, when they were laid off, we have heard anecdotally that they have gone into other fields because the sector was just so unpredictable and they needed to have a steady income. The two success stories that we could come up with is we have 2 hotel openings planned for 2022. One is the Cambria New Haven on Route 34, and the other is the Hotel Marcel in the old Armstrong or Pirelli building, depending on how long you've lived here, what you call it, right off exit 46. And because of the architecture and the sustainable materials and operations that they have planned, we should receive a lot of national and international attention because of what this hotel represents. The other big winner during this period was the opening of the Westville Music Bowl. Because it was an outdoor venue, they had tremendous success. And what we found is during the summer, people would come, and if there were 2 shows on the weekend, they were actually staying in the local hotels to go to 2 shows. So that was one of the benefits, you know, truly unexpected benefits of the opening of the Westville Music Bowl. In terms of infrastructure, I think we can look at look to the future with a lot of optimism, given that the federal infrastructure bill has passed. Although the details aren't all out there, we know that we are going to benefit. We have already seen improvements in our air service. Tweed has begun terminal upgrades. We now have flights through Avelo Air to 6 Florida destinations. Later this quarter, they should be announcing the first Midwest destination. The runway will be extended, which will make the airport more attractive to additional airlines. And eventually, they hope to move the current terminal over to the East Haven side and to make it, you know, much more modern. We also have improvement in rail, which will definitely impact our ability to interact with businesses in Boston and New York. As those services are improved, we will see greater activity along Shoreline East and the Hartford line. For bus service, and I know Betsy and I have talked about this because the Move New Haven study was going to negatively impact Woodbridge in terms of the routes. We're hoping now because the original plan was supposed to be a net zero cost plan, we're hoping now with the additional infrastructure money that all of the data that was collected for the Move New Haven study can be re-examined to determine a way to expand the actual service rather than just redirect it among the region. This is really important to get people out to different communities. We have a lot of people in our city centers who work in the suburbs. So we need to make sure that we aren't impeding people's access to jobs by not providing bus service. For workforce, this has been an incredible time of investment in workforce development. And a lot of it is, because of the increase in unemployment, but a lot of it is also directed towards the underemployed, people whose skills are aging out. And the goal is to get them through programs from Workforce Alliance, the colleges, the universities, so that they can have skills that are able to help them get jobs and good jobs in the new economy. We're seeing a lot of work being done by the Governor's Workforce Council. And again, a lot of collaboration between business and higher ed. During the 2008 recession, one of the things we saw was that a lot of people went back to school. We saw an increase in the number of people throughout the region in the percentage of people who had bachelor degrees, masters, PhDs. All of those categories went up during that recession. This time, we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is that people are opening new businesses. And what we are hoping what we know we're going to get and what we're going to analyze and try to get more detail on is what types of businesses are being opened. What are the sectors? Are they businesses that are likely to grow and have more employees? Or will they be, just solopreneurs? We really don't know the answer to that question, but it's definitely something that bears closer scrutiny. We touched on housing earlier. If you have had a house, it was a great investment. Unfortunately, for the people who are looking to buy their first home, they're being squeezed out of the market simply because there isn't enough inventory. To help address this issue, the state has required all of the towns to submit a housing plan by July of 2022. Each of our towns is doing that, but a lot of them are also working with the South Central Region Council of Governments to really sort of envelop it into a regional plan. Every town will have their own plan because we know every town is different. But what it will do is make it more cohesive so that when we're looking at housing, we're not looking at it piecemeal, we're looking at it throughout the region. We've seen continued development throughout the region. The highest concentration is in New Haven with a lot of rental units, but we're also seeing a large number of permits in places like Milford. Resilience. This is a very big deal for EDA, and they would like a lot of attention included in the SEDS about this. We really need to identify the ways in which we can respond to emergencies. And we're not just talking about the pandemic or weather. We have seen in other states where they've had issues with cybersecurity, access to water and power. We've experienced the supply chain shortages. So those are some of the things that we will be including in the SEDS about what we can do right now, just sort of as this is how we do regular business, and then what our response would be in the event of, something that would disrupt any of these different areas. One of, as I mentioned again earlier, Connecticut doesn't have the best reputation in terms of business friendliness. Often when you see the ranking of the 50 states, we are not very high on that list. But what we're seeing now is that there are changes that are happening. Businesses have always had concerns about moving into Connecticut, given our fiscal situation. There is concern on any business's part that, okay, anytime there's a shortage of funds in government, the solution is to increase taxes. And often that ends up being businesses. We have made progress in terms of the rainy day fund, credit rating upgrades. The unfunded pension liability is still a very large issue because the additional payments have been small, but it is a priority and that will continue to be worked on. The other big factor is we are going to have 2 new revenue streams. Online gaming has already started. Cannabis is on the horizon. And, at this point, it really will be interesting to see how much revenue those 2 initiatives actually generate. We've also started to improve our e-government services. My Connect for Businesses is a much better way of registering businesses, paying your taxes, all kinds of things that in a lot of states have already been online, but it's new to Connecticut. Huge improvements at DMV, and as part of the COVID response, being able to download your vaccine information to your phone and stick it in your wallet is a great opportunity. Opportunity zones are areas identified. They're typically in cities. They're in socially vulnerable areas. And what EDA does is offer additional incentives for businesses that are willing to locate in those areas. And although it's a lower priority for EDA, it is still it's still something that they want us to watch and try to help in those areas. The other change that has been helpful in terms of our reputation are changes to the Transfer Act. There were only 2 states that have Transfer Acts, and what it has to do with is contamination of parcels, and there was liability that could continue after a business purchased that land. And what they've done is they've started to make changes to that. They are continuing to work on it, but some of the things that they have done are to limit the amount of time that you are possibly liable for that contamination. They have reduced the number of chemicals that are included in that. And there were also sort of pass-through situations with chemicals and contaminants that would get somebody triggered into the Transfer Act. And they really never had any possibility of contaminating the land, but because they had it, they were included. This removes a lot of those responsibilities. As we all know, cultural equity and social justice is very high on the region's agenda. We're working, and you've seen it as we've gone through the different sectors, about making employment opportunities more available with better training to all members of our region. Efforts to reduce the digital divide, certainly when people were working and learning from home. Better access to healthcare. I think seeing how people who were not able to access healthcare on a regular basis had serious comorbidities that made them more susceptible to negative outcomes from COVID-19 really just drove that point home. We've seen about the workforce and childcare being an issue, as well as the public transportation improvements. The next steps, if you're interested in serving on a said subcommittee and they're listed here, just let me know. We're doing the annual update for 2022 while we're simultaneously working on the 5-year seds. It just has to do with approvals and timing. So it's a lot of work, but we have some really great people who are working on it with us. And if you're interested, we'd love to have you. We will be continuing our community outreach to other municipalities and community groups. You can see the due dates that we are working under, but I want to stop there so that there is time if you have any questions or comments, because we'd love to hear what you have to say.
This is Cleo. I had a question about the Move New Haven comments
Sure.
you made. Because I remember going to a meeting years ago. I mean, it was a long study. So
Yes.
are you saying it's sort of on hold because of the infrastructure deal?
It really wasn't moving, or Move New Haven. It had sort of just stalled. And it's probably a good thing because they're going to be able to do more. That, at least that's what we believe, because there will be money. So instead of having, trying to work out a plan where there was no change in cost, with the additional funding, we should be able to expand the areas where we provide services.
That sounds great, but there's no like timeline or anything.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
not yet. We don't
haven't-
have the details from the infrastructure bill yet.
Right.
Guidance hasn't been provided. One of the things that did happen after the study was complete, Amazon, when they opened their location in North Haven, actually needed to get their workers to work. They reduced the amount of Sunday service to our shoreline communities, particularly in the summer, when many of those workers along the shoreline were using the bus. And this was to get the people to Amazon. So I think, to Barbara's point, with the cost of cars, the cost of operating a car, all the other things that come along with owning cars, we do think, and that's a priority in the infrastructure bill, to have more public transportation. So we do think that it will be a good opportunity. And Governor Lamont has also indicated that this is a priority for him as well.
That's great. And the Transfer Act changes, I think, are the best thing ever, especially for the small business landowners who were stuck in situations for years and years and years.
And there were it was really a grassroots movement that worked really hard. Frank Hurd was one of the people who led the charge. They had seen deals fall apart, and there weren't valid environmental reasons for these deals not to happen. And they took the time and the effort to educate the legislators, and we really did have a positive outcome. And they are continuing that work, and they have agreement that there are still changes that can be made to make the whole process better.
I had a question.
Sure.
Mr. Sean, going back to that, you had a slide on the workforce, and you spoke about, people with various, degrees, and then you mentioned something about businesses. Do you have anything regarding skilled labor? Because that's a big issue, and there's a shortage of it, and it can definitely use some improvements on skilled labor.
Absolutely. As we all, I have a lot of friends who did improvements on their home while they were working from home, and trying to get skilled labor was incredibly difficult. There was a lot of delays. What we're seeing now is Workforce Alliance is looking at developing those programs. They do have one for manufacturing, starting with the most basic skills and working your way through stackable certificates. I do not know specifically if they have something for skilled labor, and I would have to check that for you, unless Ginny knows.
I mean, and there's also, I mean, there's, you know, improvements in trade schools, and there's, you know, Milford's rebuilding Platt Tech, and I
Yeah.
mean, it's a,
So we just submitted an application last week for a job training program that will take place in partnership with Penn Globe in terms of getting more folks ready to go into manufacturing with those skills. We're asking for several millions of dollars, but I think one of the challenges that VOTEC is currently having and what we're having is we can't find VOTEC professionals that can teach VOTEC courses. I'm currently on a hunt for a VOTEC project manager. There's a big assumption that we are going to be funded for this project, but frankly, I am not a VOTEC project manager. It's not the skill set I have. And if you know of someone, please share your information with Betsy and she'll get it to us. But we are definitely looking for, and I know the state is looking as well, for VOTEC teachers, and they're looking on changing the qualifications or the certifications so that more people who are in the industry but may not be certified to teach will be certified to teach, because that would increase the number of folks that we can produce. So we're very supportive of that initiative.
right, thanks.
And North Branford has brought in a lot of VOTEC skills into their high school. And Eli Whitney is also growing their programs along with Platt Tech.
Robert, did you, were you gonna say something before?
Oh, no, I was going to ask a question about the transfer of
Oh, okay.
that Cleo brought up, issue so that deals with limiting liability for property. Is that that has some environmental contamination, basically?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so,
As
but I
long
wasn't
as you're
sure.
not the person who actually created the contamination.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense, and it's a great example of doing something that actually it's just changing how, you know, laws and regulations promotes business that way. Yeah, thank you.
Does anybody have anything else? Okay, well, we know you have your CETUS project to do, so thank you very much for having us, and we're going to let you move on to that.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. And
Appreciate
if
it.
Thank
there's anybody who wants to volunteer, Cleo has already volunteered and she can tell you
Yes.
very rewarding. So thank you.
Right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Okay, that was really interesting. Yeah. Well, shall we then go on to following the agenda goal discussion? Or do we look at the application next?
I think we have to stay in order because this is a special meeting.
Oh, right.
So
Okay.
I can share my screen and pull up the document here. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm having a blank now. Which of these two have we already reviewed?
We reviewed the town plan, and we're going to look tonight at the 2013 Yale EDC plan.
Great. Okay.
And maybe it's worth, can I just share out what I took away from our last discussion when we went through the town plan, and we were all brainstorming about potential goals. The 4 things that I wrote down just to check that they're in sync with what everybody else thought we got out of the last session we talked about this stuff. So is that good, everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So item 1, that potential EDC goals for 2022 and beyond. First one was improve town incentives for business development, and part of that is reapproaching the Board of Selectmen about tax abatements, look into TIF incentives, which I think Sean brought up, and look into and discuss with TPZ options for improving the zoning in commercially zoned areas. That was item number 1, things we could do. Item 2 was reapproach the signage and wayfinding proposal. You know, as I found out, you guys have already created this wonderful package, and especially for the business district, and look for ways to finance that, whether it be from the business community or the town. 3, when we come up with some improved incentives and signage and all that, get feedback from the business community, and use the interested business community that comes to our social, you know, our events as a focus group. And then finally, 4, armed with better incentives, see if we can actually talk to property owners to facilitate development. Those are the 4 things that I took away from our last time we talked about goals. Anything there anybody doesn't want still on the table or wants to add to that from our prior conversation? Good. I'll take silence as yes.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So let's just talk through the YALE plan and see if there are other things we can add to this list potentially that become goals that we might work on this year and in the future. So, yeah. I'm trying to scroll, Betsy, on your screen. So those are those. So do you want to let's just talk through the bullet points and see if anybody wants to bring something from the bullets into our goal list. So the first thing that YALE plan talked about was defining the business district as a brand, creating an identity and marketing. Using consistent signage and other devices to really establish the physical boundaries of the district. And I certainly think we already have something of that on here if we can get reapproach the signage plan that you guys have put together already. That would, to me, in some ways do that. But is there anything else from that that I need to add to this list? Anybody has a thought? Okay. Also in the plan, they talked about when and if the state Department of Transit redevelops exit 59, use that as an opportunity to make changes. And I think I actually asked, you know, there's nothing on the table right now from the Department of Transit, right, for that we're aware of, correct, Betsy?
Right, it's still being developed, and I'm not sure when we can expect to hear back from them.
And they would they come back to us though looking for some input from the town, or would they come back and say, here you go?
Yes,
They
they'd
would.
be looking for input.
Okay, so we kind of have a natural ability to speak up when that happens. So it doesn't have to be a plan per se. And YALE, the next thing on the YALE plan was encourage infill mixed use commercial and residential development. And I think that might relate to what we already put on the plan about talking to TPZ about making the zoning very friendly for different kinds of development in the business district. Make sense? Okay. Great, let's scroll on. They talked in the plan, they talked about doing a business district website, which would be really, really difficult to maintain, I know. So not sure that's something that we would want to do. And they also talked about, as part of signage, putting like a map to kind of identify here are the boundaries of the Woodbridge business district somewhere centrally located in town. So again, it would go toward the signage plan that we've talked about. Yeah, one thing, the plan keeps talking about the Woodbridge Business District to be known as the Village of Woodbridge. Do we know if that's something that was ever validated, like approved?
No, and I think that it's still somewhat controversial. I don't think there's any agreement on what it should be called.
I see. So I guess if we ever get to revisit the signage proposal, that's the time that has to get decided, right? If you're going to create a specific name for the area.
Yeah, is my assumption correct? Do people agree with me that there is disagreement?
Oh, there's definitely disagreement, and I
That's the
always,
vibe that I get.
I always heard that the village was referred to a specific development that was, you know, supposed to happen and never did off Bradley Road.
Oh, interesting, because that's, I mean, in the plan, they talk about defining the entire business area as the village. you know?
Right.
Yeah, it's just something that we would have to get settled if we're ever going to do a serious signage project there.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems with that study is it's so old now.
Right.
Yeah,
And I don't think that the retail shops on Bradley Road were built when the study was done.
when this study was done. Okay,
I don't know. Does anyone know?
probably. Well,
The study's from 2013, right?
it is. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so I think the shops were there then.
That was there.
2008 to 2013 was the period that they worked on it.
My biggest takeaway is, yeah, that we need to somehow promote mixed use, but I think there's a lot of assumptions in their study that we have no control over. Like, you know, the Lucy Street development, you know, those are all individual landowners. We can't tell them how to change the look of their structures and
Sure.
what
we
kind of
can.
businesses to put in there. But my biggest takeaway is that sidewalks are good. You know, if we want to
Yeah.
do anything, we got to get more sidewalks in.
Yeah, we do.
And then the idea to try to develop that Selden Street as being more of a street instead of a back alley.
Mhm.
Right, and they had specifics in the plan about how to do that, right? You know,
Right,
but not things that are free either.
right.
Yeah.
So Cleo, I had a similar concern when I looked at this regarding, you know, the residents that are in this area as well. You know, how realistic is that, right? That you want to have this mixed use, but you're talking about really changing a residential area in order to make room for commercial development. How ready is Woodbridge for that? And is it realistic?
Is it, but is the purely residential areas would not, we wouldn't want to change that, would we? I mean, that wouldn't, we're not trying to change that.
Right, but a lot of the proposal along Lucy Street and some of the other areas, there are residential neighborhoods there that would be affected by this type of development. Right?
Well,
They try to make it seem like, oh, well, we can work it in, you know, within the residential areas, and I think Cleo brings up a good point. Like, can you tell people what to do with their homes?
absolutely
Right.
not. No,
And
you can't.
does that make this challenging?
It certainly does.
Right.
But zoning could decide where you can do things, right? So if they were so inclined, they could say you can do certain things on 63, but not 69, right? Because there's more residential on 69.
Sure.
Or they could say you can do XYZ on Bradley, but not Merritt or Landon. So there are ways, you know, you could, if you wanted to, make recommendations to zoning that are not so specific as to include streets, but then they would be the ones to decide if or how to do something like increase density or allow more mixed use.
Absolutely, Betsy. And there are actually so many subsections of zoning areas in that area. You know, I think there are like 5 different zones in that small area. So just at least understanding what each zone allows now and figuring out what could we do to make it more friendly for development by changing it if possible. While respecting the fact that some zones are more residential and we wouldn't want to try and change that on. Scott, what do you think of that? If you have the ability to be very focused on making changes that permit more development.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think I'm not sure what the reaction would be to that. I mean, I know that's a very close-knit community that's there, and
Sure.
it's, I think any type of development in that area, you're going to have to address this issue.
Sure,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, if this is the targeted location for commercial development, it's a kind of the elephant in the room that you have.
Maybe look for the easiest place to start. You know, start
Right.
with something that's less controversial and see how it goes.
Right.
Or, I mean, you just try to organize them and engage them very early on so that you can, you know, they can have their say and get some
Sure.
buy-in and so on, so they don't feel like they're excluded.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is actually something that the 2030 task force is working on. Jerry sits on that group, and they are eagerly awaiting a proposal from somebody who would do sort of an updated, maybe a little more easy to accomplish plan than the plan that you're discussing right now. And part of that proposal would include a lot of outreach to the public with a specific focus on the folks who live and work in that area, so that any suggestions that are made are done in a very sensitive way.
There you go.
Great. That sounds good. Maybe we'll be able to piggyback and help if we can.
Absolutely, and they would want to engage with EDC.
Yeah, super. So why don't we keep scrolling along here to see if there's anything else you want to take out of this? Perhaps not.
I mean, the only other thing, I mean, like at a very high level, I mean, the bottleneck traffic type of issue down there is something that needs to be addressed. And I know there was mention of something about a connector road in the YALE study, but I mean,
Yes.
we're not going to solve that now, but that's something that's going to.
And that seems like something that if the DOT really did a major change to that area because of that might be an opportunity then.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And I believe at the time that this plan was written, that was something that the DOT was contemplating, the connector road. And the last time we heard from them, they had taken that off the table. And we asked them to look at it again. And we have not heard back since. So their assumption for taking it off was that it would just dump traffic from either 63 to 69 or vice versa. It wouldn't. And I don't know, what kind of studies they do to make these determinations, but their assumption was that it wouldn't alleviate the problem, it would just shift it.
I see. Well, I guess an opportunity to talk about that is when they come back with here's now we're getting ready to do something, right?
Right.
Okay. Right. Well, so we keep scrolling down. Let's see. Streets, yeah. So what about the whole notion of, this was a big part of the plan of creating streets and sidewalks. Is that something that's even worth putting on our list, or is it just too, expensive and pie in the sky to even talk about? I'd love to hear what people think.
That the 2030 task force is going to be looking at with this planning consultant, and simultaneously we will be working with a consultant through the COG that we got with a DOT grant, and that consultant will be specifically focused on prioritizing where sidewalks should go, and if or how we can improve cycling transportation in the district as well.
Oh, great. So that sounds like that's actually being covered elsewhere and would not be something
Yeah.
we need to even consider on a list. Super. It looked like a hard one, so I'm really glad to hear someone else is looking at that.
Just-
It is quite a doozy. It's
When we think about connecting Lucy Street to Selden, right? Obviously, there's Route 63. How would that work, right? This idea, if you were to have sort of through sidewalks and have this connection between 63 and 69, right? And all the way to Selden Street and then across into the West River, you're talking about crossing the two major roadways there. So is that an intersection? Is it, that's what I was trying to envision is as I was
I think it
looking.
might be lights in an intersection, right? To do that.
yes. So currently, we did a walking study back in 2017, I think, with the DOT, which included that area, and part of the lane, so Bank Street, which is what Lucy becomes once it crosses 63. Part of Bank Street is wide enough to accommodate a sidewalk if you lost the turning lane. And then the part closer to Selden, you'd need to, take some of that grassy area to turn into a sidewalk. You would probably also need to remove trees because there's trees that line either side of Bank. So you'd need to remove trees on one side of Bank probably.
Mhm.
And there is a crosswalk there, but it does not have a functioning pedestrian signal, which is not up to DOT standards. So when DOT comes to do this exit 59 update, whenever that is, they're supposed to also upgrade that signal. And same thing with 69. There's a crosswalk there. They may have put in a pedestrian signal when they did the upgrades over there. But you're right, without a pedestrian signal and without a crosswalk, it's no easy task to cross the road there.
Okay, well, I look forward to hearing about
Yeah.
whatever comes out of both of those, the DOT and the 2030 commission on that. That sounds great. Yeah, they certainly raised the issue here that we don't have, we have a lot of small business, but no big anchor, right? Of some kind. So, I mean, again, I hope it's not too pie in the sky, but if we can do something to make our area more development friendly, could we lure something larger to the Woodbridge business area? I don't know. Maybe that's just too naive, but I'm asking, maybe.
I join you in the naive thinking, Robert.
Yeah, but
I
if we
just
don't
feel like
try,
they
nothing will
spent
happen.
a lot of the report talking about Selden Street, and I think there's more opportunity on Bradley Road because of all
Yeah.
the empty land.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I look, every time I drive now down there, I'm really looking with the EDC in my head, like, oh, that's a spot. Why can't we do something there? So you're right. That would be for something larger. That would probably make more sense. Yeah. Yeah. So let's try. Let's make it very development friendly and then see if we can do something to facilitate that. Yeah. I don't know if the rest is probably more just, this is probably, I think we might have actually covered all the points that I personally wanted to bring out of this. Because this is more like the backup of what I had sort of said in the beginning. Yeah. Yeah, these are really all just support points for,
Mhm.
I mean, if you want to, it's kind of, here was their action plan that they gave us back in 2013. One was establishing a business special services district, which probably wouldn't be very easy to do because you have to get the people who are in the area to vote for it,
Mhm.
right? And it becomes another taxing authority. Are any of these things, Betsy, on the 2030 list as they look at what to do in our business area? Like the shared parking, that kind of thing? Is that sort of being discussed there too?
Well, they don't have a proposal from the consultant yet, so
Okay,
they
so
haven't
that's-
gotten
yeah.
that far.
Okay. So yeah, these are outcomes. You're right. That so we'd have to see what the consultant comes up with to then see where it goes. Okay.
But certainly, prior to the pandemic, we had started 3 business sort of networking groups that were meeting monthly, and they were all thematically tied. So one was health-related businesses. That was a pretty successful group. There would regularly be about 15 people at those meetings. Another one was retail and services. And another one that met occasionally was a group of artists. And I started thinking just prior to the pandemic when these groups kind of fizzled, that maybe it would be more efficient or effective to have all businesses be invited to meet, because although there were some health specific things that came up at the wellness group, and there may have been some retail specific things that came up at that group, what they were all talking about and what they were all interested in is how do we bring more business, more foot traffic into the business district? Because if you're going to the masseuse, maybe you could also get your hair cut or buy something next door or take your dry cleaning to the folks down the street. So how do you kind of create this symbiotic relationship and sort of this networking and relationship building along with events or marketing could really help? Because I'm skeptical that we could bring in something really, really big. But if we create this really strong network of relationships among businesses, they could be really, and I think they do this already to some effect. But how do we build on that? Because that, I think, could possibly be very effective.
So what would we do? What would our role be to facilitate that?
I think, either creating a physical space where people can come and meet, or I don't know how effective it is on Zoom right now.
No.
But I do think it's about bringing people together. The shops at 245 have held a few successful events because they all collaborate together, and that's what makes the event successful. So is that something that could be replicated at other plazas? And if so, would the folks at 245 be willing to talk about what they've learned and how they did it and that sort of thing?
So would we then create events to get that started? Kind of? Is that?
We could. I mean, and I've heard other towns, probably towns with more retail, do coupon things. If you buy something at shop A, then you get a coupon to shop V, and vice versa. Or there's the just all these different events that try to get you to go in the door of a business. Or you look at empty shops and you put art or live music in there, just something to bring people into the business district, because I think a lot of people, residents even, don't know what we have, and or people coming into town to work go to their office and go home and don't realize that they have all of these services and shops at their disposal, because it's just not something that they see.
Yeah, I just put that down as a new item on our list, to take away from this. Great.
Betsy, quick question. Now that it's about a year later, would you say that the Woodbridge Bucks program was worthwhile that we did last year?
I think so. I feel like anytime you do something for the first time, it's kind of shaky. But I feel like if you do it 2 or 3 times, and it gets more awareness and people understand it. I actually had someone email me shortly before the holidays to ask if we were doing it again because she wanted to buy them as presents for teachers.
Oh, what a great thing. Yeah.
I mean, my mind was, yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Debbie. My mind was going there as we were talking about this because I thought it was pretty successful. And we could, run with it again and just improve upon it. And Betsy, you were saying that 245 is successful because they collaborate, and then you mentioned that doing things hard to achieve this over Zoom, etc. So maybe we can pitch it to them to share this, their best practices for their collaboration with other shopping areas, and see if we can do that in May or June when the weather warms up and people can do things in person and COVID numbers will more likely be down because
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking maybe we improve upon something we started last year rather than dismiss it, because it does have a little, it'll ring familiar to at least a few folks and can build on it. And if we try a second year and it doesn't grow, then okay, then maybe we disregard it for the following year. But I feel like it was good enough that it should not have been just a one and done.
How much did Woodbridge Bucks cost us to do, the EDC to do, would you say?
I think EDC spent about $500 on the gift certificates, and then maybe another 150 or 200 on ads.
Was not a big expense.
No.
Were they all redeemed and then paid back out to the merchants, or did it? What did it?
I think there was one that was not redeemed.
Okay, so the people who got them really went back and used them locally.
Yeah.
So that is good.
And there are other towns that have something, very a formal program where there's an actual card, like a gift card that you would buy at a store, and you can buy them at a store, but your card is usable at any of the participating merchants. So we don't have to worry about things getting lost in the mail or us doing the tracking. And then if EDC wanted to do that, you could buy some on your own and give them out as promotions, but it would also be, EDC would be sort of facilitating it, but we wouldn't be handling the money or tracking things.
I think we looked into that last year, and there was a company that kind of serviced that, but I don't recall what the cost was, because obviously
there's a couple companies. I know I reached out to the folks in Middletown because they have one. So there's 2 companies that I know of, and there's probably several others.
Right. It might be worth looking into. Otherwise, we could kind of just do it the way we did last year with a few improvements. But I would hate to spend $25 to issue $20 when you build in their fees. I don't know exactly what the margins are.
Yeah, I put down Woodbridge Bucks for year 2, so we'll let's do it. See what we come up with. Great.
And just one general note, because I do have to hop off in a moment, but with what the 2030 task force is working on, and the housing study committee, and planning and zoning, and our commission, I feel like would it be prudent to meet all together once in a blue moon, or share communications more often? Because I would hate for any of these groups that are really digging into information to go down a road, and then we say, oh, someone else is looking at that, or oh, the housing study committee is recommending X. Well, P&Z just received a proposal of Y, but the task force thinks it should be used for Z, and the EDC suggests something else. So I feel like if there's a little more sharing of communication, or maybe a group meeting once or twice a year,
that's a great idea, Debbie. And
it's like a big Venn diagram. There's so much what we're all doing.
yeah, make sure we're not operating in silos. And I think, I mean, creating a new meeting and asking people to attend it is probably not gonna go over well. But I think a way
But
to
Right.
a way to facilitate it, make it happen is we could just add an agenda item to our respective meetings and just have like a 15-minute session of like touching base with those other groups.
Right. Or right, because I totally agree. Nobody wants to add a meeting, but maybe everybody, if their schedules align, maybe everybody's May meeting is
Yeah.
canceled and it's a group meeting instead. So you're still having your one meeting a month, but
Mm.
maybe it's combined rather than adding a special meeting.
Mm.
Or just, because Betsy, I think, facilitates two of the groups and Chris Sullivan facilitates two of the groups. So maybe there's just a way to share our minutes, or one of us can pop in on one of their meetings and give an update, or someone can visit us and give an update. I'm not quite sure, but I just don't want anyone spinning the wheels and not getting anywhere.
Yeah,
Great.
as we
point.
just would have been if we hadn't heard from Betsy about what 2030 is doing, right?
Exactly.
Kind of started down a whole road pointlessly, which is the last thing we want to do.
That's
Yeah.
right. And there could be 4 proposals in the gossip mill of what to do on in certain areas of town, and it could stress people out for no reason.
Yes. Yep. Well, I put that down to more communication with 2030 TPZ, EDC, and the housing study group, right? Those are the ones you ticked off that we probably need to understand what everybody's working on and coordinate it better. Yeah, great. Well, I think that's the end of this, isn't it, Betsy?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, great. Good. I mean, now my list is up to 7 here. Maybe we'll talk about the 7 items next time again, and see if we want to, codify that as here's what we're working on for now. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on goal discussion, or should we go to the last things and before we lose Debbie, because she's our quorum, if we have to vote on anything?
Let's move to the next item then.
Great. All right. So Betsy, I see review CEDA's best practices application. Do we actually need to review it?
You don't need to. And I just realized I don't have the document in front of me, so I'm trying to pull open my email, take a look at it in case you do want to.
Sure. Is there anything you say we should be looking at on it? I guess maybe, or.
Let me pull it up here.
Okay.
So this is the Connecticut Economic Development Association's Best Practices Program. And this is their second time doing it. They first did it a few years ago. And it's sort of, half of it has to do with economic development things, and the other half seems to do with planning and zoning. So I worked with Chris Sullivan, who works closely with TPZ and inland wetlands to work on this. And this is still just in draft format. Let me share my screen for you. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
So I apologize, this is the Word document. The application is online, so we don't have the questions. I just have the answers. So this is a little discombobulated. But some of these first questions have to do with communications. So a lot of this is fact-based. So TPZ offers pre-application meetings for people who are applying for a zoning permit and may want to have some questions answered before they go before the full board. We keep our economic development website up to date. We have an e-newsletter for businesses. Our land use regulations are online. TPZ communicates with applicants within 72 hours of receiving an approval. We have GIS mapping available for the public to use. One question they asked about is, do we have a written brand identity or marketing strategy? Which we do not. That was something that was mentioned in the Yale Urban Design Workshop plan. So
It was.
marketing obviously is a gap that we continue to have. They ask about TPZ if they coordinate meetings with different departments. Most of the departments that they need to coordinate with, Chris wears all of those hats, so she coordinates with herself. Let's see. They ask about events and diversity.
I think you got to go back. There's something that really was blatant to me as a negative. That number 11. You can't just say it's not been an issue. How do you know?
Oh, so there's actually, this is obviously a note to myself, which is why it's highlighted. There's no plan for a specific grant that we get to supply transportation for people. We have to, if you meet a certain threshold under the census, and we're close, we're not there yet, we have to supply translation in some form. So we have a service that we can use. It's a phone call service. We have not, to my knowledge, used it yet.
But to your
But
point,
this is
it's not a
specifically
requirement because we're not at the threshold, right?
for that purpose, for that grant. So to date, there's no plan. This is specifically about using a translator at a TPZ meeting when somebody comes in for a meeting and they don't speak English and need to have whatever's going on at the hearing translated for them. So at those meetings, that has not been an issue yet.
Well, maybe just change the wording instead of not been an issue, not.
These are just notes to myself, Cleo. This is
Oh, okay. Not been a need or whatever.
That's not the final version. that goes into-
absolutely not. It's not even
Understood.
a proper
Yeah.
sentence.
Sure, sure.
I mean, do
Yeah.
you think that we're really ready to apply for this? Just
I
given
think
the
it
fact
doesn't
that,
hurt.
like, we don't work collaboratively with planning and zoning yet, you
But
know,
we're
just
going to.
things like that, right?
We're going to.
Yeah,
Well,
but
I
this-
think, and I sent this all to you earlier today. I don't know if you've had a chance to
Yeah.
review it, and it's probably not useful in this form because it doesn't come with the questions. But what I could do tomorrow is send out a link to the questions so you can kind of pair them up. I think this is a useful tool. I agree with you. I don't know if it makes sense to apply right now, but I think it's a very useful tool to see what they think are the standards. And I think that we meet most of them. You know, I think we're like a solid C+.
And we had to meet a certain number of checking the boxes to even qualify, right? And we were getting close, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certain glaring issues here, like the marketing. We don't have anything for
Yeah.
marketing. But certainly a lot of these other things
Mhm.
we do. Let's see. Apologize, you know, obviously I don't know off the top of my head what the answers to questions or what the question is for 22, 23, 25, 26. So
We should probably, well, the deadline's coming up, right? So
it's in February, and I think it's right after your next meeting.
Right, it's the 10th for our next meeting. Right.
no, I mean, do we want to? I mean, do we want to make an attempt to move forward with this?
I thought Betsy was going to do it,
Yeah.
right? You're
Okay.
planning to?
Yeah, I've done probably 80 to 90% of the work, so it needs,
Yeah.
you know, they want samples of things, links. So if I say that they're, for example, you can see on question 31, they want an example. So I'm saying, see, the table on
Okay.
page 2, here's an example. So they want proof so that we're not just making things up.
Right. Okay.
Well, great. Thank you for showing it.
So I'll send out the questions tomorrow so you can see what these answers relate to.
Thanks, Betsy. Yeah, I mean, I remember we kind of breezed through it with Jeremy in several meetings ago, and that was the last I saw of it.
Was the new application much different than the one we reviewed?
I don't think it's significantly different. It's certainly, the previous one did not include a language translation question. It didn't ask anything about diversity or equity, and this new one does. I don't think the previous one asked about form-based zoning. So most of the things that they're asking about don't directly relate to EDC. They're more about sort of best practices for TPZ, which obviously affects what EDC can accomplish.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Do we have to approve the meeting dates that I thought you kind of postponed that from an earlier meeting? Or is that just de facto, those are the meeting dates?
Did we not approve those at the previous meeting?
I
I
don't think.
don't,
I think we
so.
did, didn't we?
or did we? Look, but let's say we did.
Oh, no, but we didn't have a quorum last month. So we couldn't
Right.
have. That's what.
And I
Oh,
don't think
okay.
we had enough to vote in December either.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, this is a special meeting. It's not on the agenda, so you cannot vote on it this evening. So I will be sure to put that on next month's agenda.
Okay, sounds great. Approve the 2022 dates. Great.
Mhm.
Just, did anybody have a problem with the dates? Just, I know we're not going to officially approve them, but it was basically as straightforward as this, the second Thursday of every month. So,
Yep.
Okay, great. Super. And are there any updates and announcements to share?
I don't have anything. Betsy, is there anything new and exciting that you haven't told us about yet, Betsy?
Well, the Housing Committee is going to release a Woodbridge specific study soon. The study that was out earlier was created by Scrog and was basically, I believe, the same survey that was sent to all towns participating in the Scrog housing plan. So the committee's coming up with some Woodbridge specific, and I think that'll be coming out that will be looking at the lived experiences of Woodbridge residents, and that will then help them determine what their work looks like. They're also starting a book club, is not exactly what it is, but a guided book discussion, and that'll start in February with the 1619 project. Trying to think what else. I told you about 2030's work.
I saw
Any
something in
new
the paper
openings or
about a
closings?
survey coming out at the end of this month.
Sorry, Sean?
I skimmed through the paper. It came today, and I saw something about a survey coming out at the end of January. Trying to find it.
Oh, that's probably the housing study.
No, and
Yeah.
there's, isn't there another study? Someone else is doing a survey too, not the library. Is it youth services? There's another study coming out, a survey, sorry.
Oh, yes, Youth Services is trying to reach out to parents about what kind of programs they're looking for and what times of day and days.
Yeah, I think the housing study might, I don't know if it'll be end of January, but it's probably February.
And the Board of Selectmen at their meeting earlier this month voted to pursue the Arbor Haven proposal. So they'll be continuing discussions on that proposal.
Any business openings or closings or coming soons?
Amity Lock moved to Woodbridge. So they're in Selden Plaza. They used to be on Whaley in New Haven.
Nice.
I've heard that
That's the only one I'm aware of right now.
I've heard that Stop and Shop is closing in Amity.
Wow, really?
Yeah, my wife mentioned that to me a day or two ago.
Yes, I saw that online. I mean, obviously
Is it
that's
online?
that's New Haven, not Woodbridge, but it
know.
affects a lot of us, sure.
Close enough. Yeah.
I mean, there's
Wow.
gonna be plenty of people who would love to see it go, but then there could be an empty spot for who knows how long.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. That plaza, ever since they redid it years ago, has never really been full to its potential.
Mhm.
And we don't know how true it is either. It's a rumor. And
Right.
evidently it's always on their short list.
Right.
Close it.
Yeah, we've heard this before that it's on the chopping block. Who knows?
It would really be devastating for the residents of Amity, New Haven.
Oh, yeah, and the Westville residents. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. That's,
What happened with the Betsy, a few months ago, you said the restaurant was moving from that Italian restaurant was going into where Wheeler's used to be.
Yeah, and I don't think that's happening anymore. Jeremy said that building was under contract, but I didn't get any details from him. I don't think it was that restaurant, but I need to follow up with him.
Okay.
But at least sounds like there was some interest
good.
in something possibly going forward with the old Wheelers.
great. That would be great news. Yeah. Well,
All right,
wonderful.
thanks, Betsy.
Oh, and last thing, I've been in touch with the Brewery Association, and they already have brewers interested in moving into the New England Brewing Company location if the brewery does not choose to keep 2 locations once they get started in West Haven. So there's at least one, possibly more brewers that are hoping to move into that space.
Fantastic.
That's great.
Great.
Cool.
Great. Well, shall I motion to close the meeting? No.
I'll second it.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for, coming out this extra night to get us to move forward. I appreciate everybody. All right.
Thanks, Betsy. Thanks, everyone.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye now.